I actually can't ethically defend eating meat. I do eat meat. I was a vegetarian for 6 years and began to feel that I wasn't getting enough protein and started eating meat again and found that I actually felt a lot better. So I think it's hard to be an intelligent and active and fit vegetarian. At least it was hard for me.
Singer denounces speciesism and claims that we should show equal respect to the lives of human beings and animals. Let us instead accept the complexity and the responsibility and the consequences and state forthrightly, rights are for human beings and for individuals, not for groups, and certainly not for animals.
For me, morality, when it comes to moral obligations, your responsibilities, where if you either do this or you are immoral, or if you fail to do it or you do the opposite, you are immoral. Yeah. That is all about a moral contract between agents. And I'm undeniably speciesist about this.
Again, I think that if we're needlessly killing animals, then I would consider moving away from that. Although I really miss hamburgers, to be honest with you.
Turkeys are weird because they have a strangely humanoid aspect to them, kind of walking around carrying what was once alive. It's gruesome and horrifying.
I don't think that we should go randomly killing animals or mistreating animals.
I feel like this turkey has been sufficiently abused.
I think that if we're needlessly killing animals, then I would consider moving away from that.
First, let's make sure it's dead. That's the first step. Okay.
Hey, what is up, guys? So today's video is going to be a little bit different from my normal, like sarcastic parody bullshit videos. It's going to be relatively serious, and the background is also a little different because I'm using my roommate Lydia's room. So thank you, Lydia, for that. Even though I didn't even ask you if I could use the room, but I doubt you really care. So anyway, yeah, today's video is going to be about how veganism makes very intelligent people stupid. Now, the way I mean this is very specific. I don't mean that, the vegan diet makes people stupid due to some sort of nutrient deficiency. I mean that when the topic of veganism gets brought up to very intelligent, scholarly people, their brains quite literally turn off.
I think there's an interesting ethical wrinkle with respect to the prospect of farming in such a way that the lives of farm animals are net positive, right? So that it's better to have existed as a cow than to have not existed at all. And if we had some sense that these are indeed happy cows, well then it would be better to raise them and treat them well and then finally eat them than it would be to not have done any of that and manage to just engineer tofu that is so healthy that we can live off of it. So I think it's an interesting ethical problem, but I would certainly acknowledge that what we have currently is not like that and that it is a horror show. So,
there are a lot of specific scholars that I see this happen to. Scholars that I actually look up to when it comes to a variety of topics. Sam Harris is somebody who has helped me to a massive degree when it comes to refining my argumentation toward religious dogma. He has helped me with understanding neuroscience, consciousness, and how to practice mindfulness meditation, but from a secular perspective, which is void of all the hippy-dippy, woo-woo stuff that comes with a lot of meditative practice. Matt Dillahunty has helped shape the way I argue against Christian presuppositionalists. Neil deGrasse Tyson and his work as an astrophysicist and planetary scientist has piqued my interest heavily in physics. And Joe Rogan, who I don't put anywhere near these people, at the very least I think is a pretty competent interviewer, and he asks very interesting questions, and has an IQ over 70, which in my opinion is the minimum IQ you need to understand the basic idea that animal abuse is wrong. So although these people are quite bright in their specific areas, when it comes to veganism, like I said before, their brains turn off.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask, do you think that the moral, whether you see it as an obligation or a virtue,
right,
not to torture a dog,
sure,
a pet dog, is that due to the social contract that you have with the dog's owner, or has that got something to do with the intrinsic moral worth of the dog?
Well, if those are the only two options, it would have to be the moral contract with the owner.
It doesn't have to be those
because
two options.
I'm not necessarily sure that there's any intrinsic moral worth. Certainly not intrinsic, but it may also be a moral contract with myself.
Now, I can keep going on and on about the different people that I consider intelligent, whose brains turn off when veganism comes up, but I think you all get the point by now. I want to now talk about the differences which separate the ethical philosophy of veganism from other schools of thought, and how these differences may be responsible for how quickly scholars turn their brains off when in the face of veganism. I'm going to start with talking about my journey from Judaism to atheism and then eventually agnosticism. When I think back at what changed for me upon discovering the secular arguments which influenced me to no longer identify as a religious Jew, there really wasn't much that had to happen. I didn't really have to make much of a lifestyle change. I kind of just changed the way I thought about things. I realized that I didn't have strong evidence to support my religious views, and then just began to mentally function as an atheist, and then eventually turned into an agnostic. Not much sacrifice was really made. My transformation also was not so much a matter of ethics, but more so epistemology, which, if you're unfamiliar with what epistemology is defined as the theory of knowledge, especially with regards to its methods, validity, and scope. Epistemology is the investigation of what distinguishes justified belief from opinion. If you're still confused after hearing me say that definition, epistemology really just is, the study of knowledge and how we come to conclusions about the world and reality. Why I decided to point out that my transition to agnosticism was a matter of epistemology, while my transition to veganism was a matter of ethics, will make sense in a few moments. So, when I take my transition from Judaism to agnosticism and compare it to my transition from non-veganism to veganism, I notice a lot of differences. As said before, veganism is a matter of ethics, while my transition to agnosticism was more a matter of epistemology. I say this because I see this distinction as partly responsible for the fact that there was a lot of guilt involved in my transition from non-veganism to veganism, and not my transition from Judaism to agnosticism. In hindsight, the fact that I was feeling guilty about not being vegan when being pressed to be vegan caused me to try and come up with extremely silly justifications that I would never use in any other context. The transition to veganism also involved an entire lifestyle shift. I had to accept that if I were to fully accept veganism, I would have to change the way I've been functioning daily, which I had been accustomed to for the last 18 years of living. Not only that, but I had to change the way I'm living to a way of living which is incompatible with 99% of the people I socialize with. With all of this in mind, it's pretty clear how much more effort fully committing to veganism required compared to fully committing to agnosticism. Alright, now back to the scholars. Sam Harris's pursuit of studying neuroscience and mindfulness meditation, or Neil deGrasse Tyson's in-depth study of physics, is much to do with just studying, descriptively, facts about the universe. And I'm certain that the study of these topics require much brain power, but it isn't often that the pursuit of these complex topics compels a person to change their lifestyle to the same degree which veganism does. Aside from niche cases of people who were in the past maybe extremely religious and had to therefore change their lifestyles upon discovering secularism, like no longer attending church or temple, most people I've met in my experience didn't really have to change much upon discovering secularism or agnosticism. Being agnostic, anti-racism, anti-sexism, etc. are generally pretty easy to do nowadays, for the clothing, food, and hygiene products people choose don't tend to be the product of racism or sexism, and therefore do not need to be altered upon accepting any of these positions. But when somebody adopts veganism as a moral philosophy, which is in part anti-speciesism, transformative action must be taken related to these kinds of products. This kind of transformation of your lifestyle can seem extremely overwhelming at first. I remember when I personally started to consider the vegan philosophy. There was 100% a part of me that was uncomfortable with change and wanted to do some mental gymnastics to try to convince myself that there was no point in being vegan and that I was in the right. And in hindsight, at least for me, this was because the idea of changing my entire lifestyle was extremely overwhelming. People are very emotionally attached to their food choices. I certainly was. Imagine if becoming secular, anti-racism, anti-sexism, or just having a massive interest in a complex topic required you to sacrifice pleasures like your favorite food or clothing. I think there would be, without a doubt, more resistance to these positions or actions. As intelligent as people like Sam Harris, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and other scholars are, just like everybody, they have emotional attachments to certain things, food probably being one of them. And these kinds of emotional attachments can easily cloud reasoning. And just a side note, what I'm about to say doesn't necessarily apply to the people I've been talking about in this video, but it very well could, and this is a thing. So when people have a lot of money, a lot of times going out to very fancy restaurants and having a sort of like luxurious meal that's expensive kind of, relays some sort of status. So there are some people who might want to not give up, the whole act of going to a very expensive steakhouse and getting the very expensive meal. Like I know some people, and I've heard of other people who have a lot of money that gain some sort of like satisfaction out of going to different restaurants and just being like, yeah, I'll take the $150 lobster. There's some sort of appeal to just, you know, luxuriously spending your money and gorging on really expensive food, even if the serving size of the food is nothing. So again, I'm not saying that this necessarily applies to the people I've been talking about in this video. It could, who knows? All right, so back to explaining the distinction between veganism and other sort of topics. Just imagine having to enter two separate debates. In debate one, if you lose, nothing significant really changes. You just have to change your position on a certain issue. This can be a debate on crime statistics, the US election containing fraud, flat earth, vaccines, conspiracy theories, etc. In debate two, if you lose, you may have to give up your favorite delicacies, change your groceries, start checking ingredients on everything you buy, look out for leather seats in future cars you plan to purchase, check to see if products are cruelty-free before buying them, etc. I think it's pretty obvious at this point why the sacrifice that comes with fully accepting veganism compared to other topics may make smart people resort to fallacies they wouldn't normally use, or just have a hard time understanding the basic idea that we shouldn't be financially supporting a Holocaust for pleasure. I've met some extremely strong social justice activists or intelligent people argue very strongly, articulately, and intelligently for specific causes they care about. Then I'll bring up veganism and they start doing weird things like deploy logical fallacies and or use pleasure arguments and be like, yeah, I just feel good when I eat animals, so yeah. Basically styles of argumentation they would be very quick to dismiss in other contexts. Just want to add a disclaimer to this video for the non-vegans listening. I don't mean to come off as like, you know, veganism is so hard and the lifestyle change is so much. It really isn't. In this video, I'm just talking about how it seems when you're not vegan. When you're not vegan and veganism gets brought up, it really seems in your head and at face value that going vegan is a giant, insane, massive lifestyle shift, when really it isn't. Just perceptually, it is. All right, guys, that is the end of the video. Like I said before, don't worry. I will be making parodies based on the specific people I talked about in this video and other people who are scholars who I deem pretty intelligent, but you know, have their brains turn off when veganism gets brought up. Now, I need ideas for this series, so I'm just curious, do you guys have any people that are very intelligent, that are well-known, whose brains turn off to veganism, which I did not mention in this video? I'd love to know, so just comment that down below, and I'll consider making a sort of parody about the stupid reasoning they use to justify paying for innocent animals to be murdered for a cheeseburger. If you enjoy my work and want to support me on Patreon, the link is in my description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who is your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid